Have you ever felt the weight of being watched, not in admiration, but in quiet opposition? You walk into a room, and nothing is said, but everything is communicated. A pause in conversation, a glance too quickly averted. The space becomes colder, tighter, as if your very presence disturbs something in the air. You don't always hear hate. Often it wears softer clothes. Polite disinterest, smiles that never quite reach the eyes, compliments with a bitter aftertaste. It doesn't storm through the front door. It sits in the corner, crossing its arms, waiting for you to slip. And in that moment, you're asked, without a word, how you'll respond. Will you confront it? Match energy for energy? Or will you do something far more disarming? You'll do nothing, but not the kind of nothing that comes from fear or fatigue. The kind of nothing that radiates composure. A stillness so rooted, so quiet, it robs their hatred of oxygen. This is not cowardice. This is transcendence. Because the moment you react, when you fire back with sharp words or let anger leak into your body language, you confirm something they secretly need to believe that they matter more than they do, that their bitterness has power, that your peace is fragile. But what happens when their barbs fall flat? When the insult lands, and you simply breathe, something shifts. You become unreachable, not because you're ignoring them, but because you've learned the most powerful act of resistance is indifference to the trivial. The quiet refusal to be pulled down into a theater of insecurity. There's nothing to win there, nothing to prove, and everything to lose. The Stoics, those ancient guardians of inner discipline, spoke often of this. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In that, he wasn't encouraging apathy. He was offering a key to liberation, to detach your emotional state from the hands of people who don't know your story, who haven't earned the right to shape your mood. Imagine someone throws a small, cruel comment your way. You know the kind, dressed in humor, but aimed with intention. The old you might have tensed, might have needed to reclaim the room with a sharper comeback. But now you just look at them, maybe with a soft, half smile, and return your attention to what matters. Maybe your notes, maybe the sky outside the window, maybe the breath inside your chest. This isn't weakness, it's restraint. It's a form of internal strength that startles those who thrive on drama, because they expected a performance, and you gave them peace. You see, those who hate you secretly crave one thing: your participation. In their games, in their smallness, in their spiral. But when you rise above, when you don't even offer them the dignity of a duel, they're left in their own noise, exposed. Their strategy crumbles in the absence of a co-star. There's an image I carry often: a mountain in a storm. The wind howls, the rain strikes sideways, the sky tears open, but the mountain does not move. It doesn't need to. It's not pretending to be unmoved. It simply is, built for moments like this. You can be that mountain. And yes, of course, it hurts sometimes. Of course, it stings to be mocked, dismissed, misunderstood. You're human. But pain is not permission to lose yourself. You can feel the heat of an insult and still choose not to fan the flames. In fact, it is in this space, this suspended moment between stimulus and response, that your truest self is revealed. Will you be like them, or will you stay with yourself? There's a silence that carries immense weight. Not the silence of retreat, but of command. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need to dance for your validation. That silence makes people nervous because it reminds them of the power they don't have. I remember someone once tried to embarrass a friend of mine in a meeting. They made a snide, cutting remark designed to wound. Everyone turned to see the fallout. My friend looked up, nodded once, and returned to his notes. That was it. And yet, in that moment, the whole room felt it, the shift in power. The aggressor looked petty desperate even. And my friend, he walked out of that room more respected than he'd ever been. Not because he fought back, but because he refused to lower himself. You don't have to pretend you don't feel things. You just have to know that you're not ruled by them. Your composure is not a costume. It's a choice. You don't owe your reaction to anyone, least of all those who secretly root for your collapse. Let them wonder why their words didn't land. Let them spiral in the silence you leave behind. Because that silence, that quiet steadiness, isn't just survival. It's a message. I'm not here to react. I'm here to rise. And sometimes the softest rise is the most powerful blow. If this resonates with something in you, something quiet but resolute, consider leaving a like or subscribe. No need to announce it, just as a silent nod to rising above. There's a tension in the room, and you can feel it before you understand it. Someone wants you unsettled. They want you flustered. They want the tremor in your voice, the quickening of your breath, the slight stumble in your words that will prove just for a moment that you're not unshakable. And maybe a part of you wants to respond, to clear the air, to put them in their place. But deeper down, something older in you knows better, because there's a kind of calm that breaks people, not because it's violent, but because it refuses to play. Some people live off reactions. They thrive in chaos, in gossip, in sharp glances, and subtle games. They don't just want to get under your skin. They want to live there, rent-free. But when you offer them no place to land, when you meet their turbulence with still water, something disorients them. They expected resistance, and you gave them a mirror. That's what calmness really is. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's a reflective surface that shows people who they truly are. They come with drama, and you greet them with a gaze. They throw bait, and you offer stillness. They question your worth, and you don't even flinch. That kind of self-control doesn't make sense to people who've never cultivated it. It makes them nervous, because it forces them to feel their own instability. You're not ignoring them because you're scared. You're ignoring them because they've disqualified themselves from your attention. And that is power. There's a quiet authority in someone who doesn't rush to defend their name, who lets rumors breathe and fade on their own. Because people are watching not just the loud ones, but the silent observers who note your composure. Imagine this. You're being undermined. Someone spreads whispers, implies things in meetings, frames doubt as curiosity. And everyone expects a reaction. But instead of meeting them at their level, you stay steady. You don't chase the narrative. You don't gather allies. You don't let the situation fracture your energy. You simply keep showing up with quiet integrity. You stay focused, and slowly, people begin to notice the difference, not between you and them, but between noise and truth. Because when chaos tires itself out, only presence remains. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. They may attack your name, but they cannot touch your nature. You may be misunderstood, but you are never misaligned." This doesn't mean you become numb. It means you feel deeply, but choose not to be directed by every current that passes through. Calmness is a rebellion in a world that worships the loudest voice. It's a decision to keep your soul intact, even when others try to stretch it thin. And in time, those who once tried to rattle you, they fall silent. Not because you silenced them, but because you rendered them irrelevant. This is where we step into something even quieter. A stillness deeper than calm. Indifference, not the kind born of bitterness or pride, the kind born of clarity. An insult is rarely just an insult. It's bait, a trap disguised as conversation. And the moment you bite, they've captured your attention. Not your agreement, not your respect, just your attention. And that's enough for them. But what happens when you don't bite? What happens when someone mocks your progress? dismisses your path, twists your story, and you respond, not with anger, not with explanation, but with nothing. They begin to shrink inside their own performance. Because without your reaction, the scene falls apart. That's what true indifference does. It starves the fire, not out of coldness, but because your warmth is reserved for things that matter. When someone's words fail to move you, it's not always because you're numb. It might be because you've already made peace with who you are. You no longer need their misunderstanding to become your crisis. You no longer need to correct the record for people who were never listening in good faith. You no longer need to win a room that lost its integrity long ago. And so you walk away, not from weakness, but from wisdom. Marcus Aurelius asked, "Why do we value the opinions of others more than our own?" It's a question worth sitting with. Most of us carry old voices, echoes from rooms we should have left long ago. And often, the insults that hit hardest are the ones we've secretly been whispering to ourselves. That's why indifference isn't cold. It's warm, because it only lives in those who've done the inner work. You've heard your own doubts. You've battled them. And now, when someone says what you've already confronted, you don't collapse. Because it's not news to you. It's old material. Picture yourself in a room where someone is undermining you again, trying to bait you with smirks, interruptions, subtle dismissals. Everyone expects a show, but you stay composed. You speak clearly. You finish your thought, and you walk away not untouched by the moment, but unbroken by it. That kind of restraint is what exposes people. It casts a quiet light on their insecurity, and your refusal to engage makes them visible in a way they weren't prepared for. Your silence becomes a kind of commentary, not a retreat. A choice, not to shrink, but to rise beyond reach. Let me be clear. Indifference is not tolerance for abuse. It's not silence when your values are on the line. It's the wisdom to know the difference between an actual threat and a cry for attention wrapped in hostility. It's the ability to filter, to choose your battles, to spend your energy like sacred currency. Because it is. Your energy is sacred. Why spend it proving yourself to someone who's already decided not to see you? Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them twist your name in rooms you'll never walk into. You already know who you are, and the moment you stop chasing noise is the moment your presence becomes undeniable. There's something rare about a person who cannot be baited, not because they don't feel, but because they've trained themselves not to be moved by every wave. Eventually, the loudest critics grow quiet in the presence of someone they can't shake. So if you've felt yourself being pulled, provoked, tested, pause. Let them wonder why their tactics don't land. Let them wrestle with the silence you leave behind. Let them argue with your absence. And while they do keep walking, calm, clear, and completely unreachable, if that speaks to something true inside you, feel free to leave a quiet mark, a like, or subscribe. No pressure, just presence. We'll keep going quietly. There's something unnerving about a person who cannot be moved, not out of pride, but out of alignment. They don't rush. They don't retaliate. They don't perform for approval. They simply are consistent, quiet, clear, and in a world built on spectacle, that kind of presence becomes a quiet revolution, because you can't shake someone who lives by principle. You can mock them. You can isolate them. You can twist their words and question their motives. But you can't control someone who's already decided what matters and what doesn't. This is what virtue really is. Not righteousness, not moral grandstanding, just clarity. The Stoics believed virtue was the highest good, not praise, not comfort, not winning the argument, just living in a way that reflects your values, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then, because pressure doesn't reveal your character. It reveals whether you ever had one. Virtue isn't glamorous. It's not loud. It doesn't post itself. It's the decision not to bend, even when bending would get you the shortcut, the favor, the applause. It's the choice to walk the longer path, and when you do it, confuses people. The ones who built their lives on manipulation don't know how to confront someone who won't play their game. It unsettles them, because if they can't tempt you, they can't trap you. If they can't provoke you, they can't control you. And if they can't shape your actions, your very existence becomes a silent confrontation with their own compromises. Virtue doesn't retaliate. It reveals. Imagine someone attacking your character, twisting your story, undermining your work in subtle, calculated ways. The temptation to respond publicly, decisively is strong, but something deeper in you says, wait, let the work speak. Let the results speak. Let your consistency speak. And when you stay the course, something shifts. Their performance becomes obvious. Their narrative begins to collapse under the weight of your integrity. Because while they were busy building illusions, you were building a reputation, and reputations built on truth. They don't need defending. That's the paradox. The less you explain, the more they're forced to confront the contrast. Your restraint becomes its own kind of resistance. Not passive, but powerful. The person rooted in virtue doesn't need to raise their voice. Their presence already says enough. And eventually, even the critics begin to feel it. They may never admit it, but deep down, everyone recognizes when they're standing in front of something real. And realness, especially in a world trained to reward pretense, feels like a confrontation. Not every win is visible. Sometimes, the most complete victory is walking away with your soul intact. Not everyone will understand your silence, but those who live with noise in their heads, the ones who depend on validation to feel alive, they'll feel your stillness in ways they can't explain. Because when someone is used to winning through chaos, they don't know how to respond to someone who wins through discipline. Let's be clear, virtue isn't weakness. It's not turning the other cheek out of fear. It's holding your ground without needing applause. It's saying, I don't need to be loud to be heard. I don't need to win this moment to win the life I'm building. And when you live like this, things begin to change. Not dramatically, but subtly. People start treating you differently, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because even if they don't agree with you, they start to trust your center. You become reliable, not in words, but in rhythm. And in time, your virtue becomes contagious. It inspires without trying. It teaches without preaching. It guides without needing to lead. Because consistency is magnetic. When people see you doing the right thing, not once, but over and over, especially when no one's watching, they begin to believe in something they'd forgotten. That strength can be silent. That success can be slow. That peace can be chosen. This doesn't mean you won't be tested. You will. There will be days when your pride wants to speak, when your ego wants to shout back, when your anger wants to play their game and win. But you'll pause. You'll remember who you are. And you'll remember that some victories cost too much. So you'll stay steady, not because it's easy, but because it's true. And that, more than any clapback, any mic drop, any moment of revenge, is what will leave them undone. You didn't play their game. You didn't match their noise. You rose, and your rising wasn't a reaction. It was a return to yourself. So if you've ever wondered whether staying true to your principles actually works, let me offer this. The people who try to shake you will always be louder than the ones who are quietly learning from you. But that doesn't mean they're winning. It just means they're not done shouting. You're building something different, something quiet, something lasting. Let that be enough. And if something in this speaks to you, leave a quiet trace, like subscribe, or simply breathe deeper and keep going. This path isn't for everyone, but maybe it's for you. There's a particular kind of silence that makes people uneasy, not because it hides something, but because it reveals something deeper. Discipline, the quiet, steady rhythm of someone who shows up, not for applause, not for vengeance, but because they made a promise to themselves, and they intend to keep it. In a world that measures success by noise, by likes, by fast results, discipline is almost rebellious. It doesn't need a stage. It doesn't crave validation. It doesn't care whether you're watching. It simply does the work. And that shakes people, especially those who secretly hoped you wouldn't last. They didn't think you'd stay consistent. They thought it was a phase, a whim, an ambition too fragile to survive the silence. But here you are, not louder, just deeper, more rooted, more aligned. You're not proving anything to them anymore. You're proving it to yourself, that you can stay, that you can hold, that you can walk the long road even when no one else claps. That's the thing with discipline. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout, "Look at me. I'm still standing." It just keeps standing. Every early morning, every late night, every quiet sacrifice that nobody sees. They build something in you. Something solid. Something that doesn't flinch when tested. And when others try to provoke you to break your rhythm, distract your focus, you don't even blink, because your attention isn't for sale, and your peace isn't up for debate. You didn't come this far to be moved by shadows. You came here to build, to become, to master something most people never even begin themselves. There's a story inside you now, not one of perfection, but one of perseverance. A story that says, I kept showing up even when it was boring, even when it was thankless, even when they laughed, especially when they laughed. And now the laughter has gone quiet, because the results, they speak in a language louder than words. People who once dismissed you will pretend they always believed in you. Let them. You're not here to keep score. You're here to keep building. They don't need to understand your process. It wasn't meant for them. It was meant for the version of you that almost gave up. The version that questioned if this path was worth it. The version that's now becoming everything they said you couldn't be. You want to know what really unnerves those who wish to see you fail? It's not your success. It's your composure. It's how you keep moving, even when you're doubted, dismissed, ignored. It's how you're not chasing anyone. You're not competing. You're just becoming. And nothing threatens someone who lives through comparison more than someone who lives through alignment. You've stopped reacting. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped wasting energy on temporary opinions. And that's the shift. Your silence is no longer a retreat. It's a presence, a declaration. It says, I don't need your approval. I've built my own, and I won't sacrifice my rhythm to dance for your attention, because attention fades. But habits shape everything. They carve you from the inside out. They prepare you not just to reach your goals, but to carry them, to sustain them, to not crumble under the weight of your own becoming. The people who watch you now, they don't know what it took. The hours, the discipline, the days you almost quit, but didn't. They only see the surface, and that's fine. You didn't build this for show. You built it for strength. You didn't grind to be seen. You did it to be free. And freedom, the kind that lasts, is born of repetition. So if you're still in that place, working in the dark, doubting your path, wondering if the silence means you're failing, Listen closely. It doesn't. It means you're forging something real, and realness is quiet at first. It grows in the gaps. It builds when no one's watching. But one day, it will be seen, not because you broadcast it, but because it cannot be ignored. So let them mock your pace. Let them underestimate your effort. Let them measure success in noise. You measure it in clarity, in intention, in peace. And when you reach the place they said you'd never reach, you won't need to tell them. Your life will. That's what discipline does. It speaks for you, and it says everything they never saw coming. Some people don't want to see you fail by their hand. They just want to see you fail, period. They don't need to strike. They just wait. Wait for the silence after a setback, for your spirit to buckle, for the weight of life to do what their words never could. They wait for you to vanish quietly, as if you never mattered to begin with. But what they don't understand, what they always forget, is that some people are built in the dark. Some people use pain as scaffolding. They don't collapse. They construct. And every time life tries to bury them, they grow roots instead. That's the paradox of adversity. It feels like breaking, but it can be the beginning of something sacred. Because what if you stopped seeing setbacks as signs to stop? What if you saw them as the forge, the place where your rawness becomes resilience, where your questions become clarity, where the silence becomes your teacher? The Stoics never promised a painless life. They didn't teach avoidance. They taught alchemy, the ability to take the worst parts of the human experience and make them into strength. That doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the chaos, when nothing makes sense, when your voice shakes, when everything inside you says, "I can't do this again." And you do it anyway, not because you're sure, but because somewhere inside, something refuses to surrender. That's where power begins. Not when you're fearless, but when you're afraid and still keep moving. Think about a time you were undone, a moment when you felt like your world was folding in. Betrayal, loss, embarrassment, the quiet grief of being misunderstood. You didn't just survive that. You emerged with new eyes. Eyes that see through the noise now. Eyes that don't flinch so easily. And that's not failure. That's refinement. The people who quietly root for your collapse, they don't expect this. They expect bitterness, not clarity. They expect silence, not stillness. But when you turn pain into depth, they're left without a script. Because you didn't just move on. You evolved. You integrated the wound into your wisdom. That makes you unpredictable. Because now, adversity isn't a curse. It's your curriculum. You're not broken by the storm anymore. You're built by it. And here's the part they never see. Every time you choose grace instead of vengeance, every time you keep walking instead of collapsing, every time you use your pain to become more generous, more thoughtful, more real, You step into a kind of strength that no insult, no rumor, no scheme can touch. It's a strength they cannot imitate because they've never done the work. They've never been forged like this. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them predict your end again and again. They don't realize they're naming their own limitations, not yours, because the person who holds their values through difficulty isn't fragile. They're foundational. Adversity doesn't scare you anymore, not because it stopped hurting, but because you know what it gives. It gives edge, insight, focus. It strips away what's false and shows you what's worth keeping. And that's worth more than ease, because ease doesn't shape you. Ease doesn't demand anything from you. But pain asks you to choose, to stay bitter or become better, to stay small or grow sharp, to stay broken or become whole in a new way. That's the quiet revolution of the Stoic. Not to pretend the fire isn't real, but to walk through it and come out carrying light. They want to see you flinch. Instead, you plant your feet. They want to see you lash out. Instead, you lower your voice. They want you to be shaken. Instead, you deepen. They can't follow you there because this path doesn't reward ego. It doesn't reward noise. It rewards the one who walks it anyway. Even when it's lonely, even when it's slow, even when the world doesn't clap, and eventually, silently, others notice. Not the ones who cheered your collapse, but the quiet ones, the ones who need to see that it's possible, to be broken and still believe, to be doubted and still walk tall, to be disappointed and still remain soft inside. You become that proof that no matter what they throw at you, you don't turn bitter. You don't seek revenge. You don't burn the world down to feel powerful. You rebuild, and your rebuilding becomes a kind of resistance, a refusal to be reduced, a reminder that power isn't found in performance. It's found in perseverance. So next time you're met with pain, pause, breathe, ask yourself, not why is this happening to me, but who can I become because of this? And then choose that version, not someday, now, because that choice, made again and again, quietly, in private, through pain, that's what makes you unshakable. That's what makes your enemies irrelevant. Because the moment they realize their greatest weapon, your hardship became your greatest teacher. The war ends, and you walk forward, not just alive, but transformed. There's a kind of aimos that speaks more loudly than any argument. It's not the silence of weakness. It's not retreat. It's a deliberate stillness, a quiet refusal, a kind of sacred distance that says, I see you, but I'm not stepping down. In a world obsessed with comebacks, claps, and call-outs, silence has become rare. But for the one who walks with inner clarity, silence is the most articulate response, because sometimes the most unnerving thing you can do is nothing. Just Breathe, look them in the eye, and let their words fall flat in the absence of your reaction. The Stoics understood this well. They didn't stay quiet because they had nothing to say. They stayed quiet because not every battle deserves a warrior. Some battles want your energy, not your victory. And when you realize that silence stops feeling like surrender, it starts feeling like strategy. Imagine someone trying to provoke you, not openly, never that honest, but with suggestion, with tone, with rumor. They want you to break character, to shout, to snap, to stumble just enough that they can point and say, "See, I was right." But when you remain still, when you answer noise with composure, they're left to argue with their own echo, because your silence becomes a mirror, and they see themselves, their fear, their projection, their desperation. It's not your job to fix that. Your job is to protect the space around your mind, to know that just because someone throws a spark doesn't mean you have to offer fuel. This is the beginning of sovereignty. The moment you choose what gets your breath and what doesn't. But silence alone is not enough. It must be paired with something deeper, integrity. Because silence without integrity is just avoidance, but silence with integrity, that's command. That's the kind of presence that doesn't need to raise its voice, because its values are already doing the talking. There's something deeply unsettling about a person who lives in alignment, someone who doesn't shift with popularity, who doesn't bend to please, who makes decisions based not on Wayne, but on what's right, even if no one's looking. That kind of person. They're hard to provoke, hard to manipulate, hard to predict. And that makes them powerful in a way most people never understand. Not because they dominate others, but because they refuse to be dominated by anything that isn't true. The colleague who flatters in daylight, but sharpens knives in the dark. They don't know what to do with someone who can't be flattered or threatened. The rival who wins through shortcuts. They don't understand why you're still walking the longer road, but you know why. Because when you choose integrity over image, when you choose values over velocity, you gain something no applause can offer. Peace. You don't look over your shoulder. You don't panic when the lights go out. You don't crumble under scrutiny, because there's nothing hidden to fear. You've already decided who you are, and the world can react however it wants. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. And alignment is what gives your silence weight. The people who try to provoke you, they aren't used to that. They're used to masks, performance, moral convenience. But when they meet someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't need validation to stay the course, they falter. Because your consistency shows them everything they gave up to fit in. And that reflection hurts more than any insult you could throw back. Now, let's be honest. Integrity costs. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be mocked for being too serious or too idealistic. You might lose opportunities, but you'll never lose yourself. And that trade, it's the most important one you'll ever make. Because when the storm comes, and it will, you won't be scrambling to protect a lie. You'll just keep standing, unmoved, still, calm. That's the person people turn to when the world shakes. Not the loud one, not the one who wins arguments, but the one whose actions never need translation. The one whose silence carries meaning, because it's backed by character. So let them gossip. Let them provoke. Let them twist your words. You don't need to chase every rumor. You don't need to correct every perception. You need only stay rooted. Because the truth has a timeline. And in the long run, consistency beats charisma every time. You'll be tested. You'll be tempted to prove, to defend, to out-clever them. But your real power is in restraint, in walking away when the argument is beneath you, in choosing stillness when chaos invites you in saying, no, this is not where I spend my energy. And then going back to your life, your quiet, rich, principled life. A life built not for the crowd, but for the soul. A life that can't be shaken because it was never built for show. Let others chase the spotlight. Let them perform virtue as long as someone's watching. You live it. And that difference, it whispers, it lingers, it draws the right people in and repels the ones who never saw you clearly. That's not rejection. That's refinement. So the next time someone tries to bait you into smallness, remember, you don't owe them your tire. You don't owe them your voice. You owe them only the integrity of your silence. And when you carry that long enough, it becomes something they can't touch, because it's not armor, it's essence. And the essence of a principled life is this: it doesn't shout, it doesn't chase, it doesn't bend, it simply is, unshaken, unapologetic, unmoved. And in that stillness, they hear everything. Some wounds linger in silence, not because they're healing, but because they were never released. We carry them like shadows in our chest, echoes of betrayal, of cruelty, of abandonment. And sometimes the people who left them behind aren't even thinking of us anymore. They've moved on, but we stay, still rehearsing what was said, still defending ourselves in imaginary conversations, still binding our peace to a past that no longer changes. It's a quiet kind of prison, one built not of walls, but of memory. But here's what the Stoics knew. You can't outrun the pain. You can't outthink it. You can only let it go. Not because it wasn't real, not because it didn't hurt, but because your future deserves to be lighter than your past. That's what forgiveness is. Not a gift to them, a release for you. And it is perhaps the final move in the art of becoming untouchable. Forgiveness doesn't excuse the harm. It doesn't mean you go back or pretend you weren't changed. It means you make a decision. I will no longer spend my energy carrying this, because hatred has gravity. It anchors you to the one who hurt you. You check their page. You replay their words. You argue with their ghost, and they still control you without saying a thing. But when you forgive, truly quietly, without ceremony, you walk away. You don't need an apology. You don't need justice wrapped in a bow. You just choose to rise, not above them, but beyond them. And that's what they never expect. The people who root for your downfall aren't always trying to destroy you directly. They just want you stuck. They want you bitter. They want you small, because if you stay there, they don't have to reckon with who you're becoming. But when you choose forgiveness, not for them, but for your own clarity, they lose their grip. They lose the thread. They fade, because your freedom is no longer entangled with their failure. That's the deepest kind of defiance. You don't hurt them by hating them. You hurt them by no longer needing them to be wrong. You stop defining yourself in opposition. And in that space, something holy begins to return. Your peace, your power, your full presence in this moment, untouched by the echoes of what was. I once knew someone who carried a deep betrayal like armor. You could hear it in every story, every silence, every guarded pause. They wore it like proof that they had been wronged, proof that trust was dangerous. But over time, that armor became heavy. They started to forget who they were before the wound. Until one day, without warning, they decided to drop it. Not for reconciliation, not for fairness, just to see what it felt like to walk free again. And when they did, they smiled, not because they forgot, but because they finally remembered who they were before the wound. That's the power of forgiveness. It returns you to yourself. It breaks the invisible contract that says, "Until I'm repaid, I will suffer." But you don't have to wait for repayment. You don't have to keep living in emotional debt. You can cancel the balance. You can say, "I choose not to carry this anymore." And then you get to live again. And those who hoped your bitterness would keep you stagnant, they watch you grow in a direction they can't follow. That is a power deeper than revenge. Now let's be clear. Forgiveness isn't fast. It's not a light switch. It's a process. Sometimes you'll forgive one morning and hate again by sunset. That's okay. The mind needs repetition. The soul needs reminders. So say it again. I choose release. I choose freedom. I choose to rise, not in anger, but in clarity. Over time, your nervous system gets the message. The story becomes softer. The memory loses its teeth. And what's left is you. Intact, clear, unshaken. And when they speak your name again, it won't hurt, because you've moved on so completely. There's nowhere in you for their words to land. That's what it means to be truly untouchable. Not cold, not numb, but free, untethered from the need to be understood, avenged, vindicated. You no longer perform your pain for the world. You just live with peace that doesn't need applause, with strength that doesn't need to prove itself, with a presence so centered, even your enemies begin to quiet, because there's nothing left to fight. You're not in the room anymore. You've built something they can't enter, a kind of wholeness they don't recognize. And in that stillness, in that life of clarity and calm, you become unforgettable. Not because you shouted, but because you never needed to. So if you're still carrying someone else's wound, this is your moment. Not to forget it, but to finally put it down. And if you need a line to hold on to, let it be this: I forgive not because they deserve it, but because I do. Let them wonder. Let them watch. Let them speak your name with questions in their voice. You don't need to respond. You already did, with the way you moved forward, with the way you stayed true, with the life you built in silence. So now take a breath, feel the weight fall off, and walk on, unbothered, untethered, unchained, because the deepest kind of power isn't how loudly you rise. It's how quietly you refuse to fall. Stay unshaken, not because they stopped shouting, but because you stopped listening. And if this path calls to you, don't just click subscribe. Make a vow to keep rising silently. I'll meet you in the next one. Until then, protect your mind and keep becoming untouchable.